All right, good afternoon, everybody. I'm an associate member of T3 Trading Group, which is an SEC registered broker dealer and member of FINRA SIPC. You should carefully consider whether trading is suitable for you in light of your own financial condition. Here is the position disclosure. I added back NVIDIA short again today. I'm keeping some JD and BABA long. Everything else that I was in intraday today, I got out of by the close. Sorry, just give me one. I'm just trying to figure something out real quick on my other screen. I don't know what I'm doing here. Oh, there we go. I can't find the YouTube stream. There it is. Okay. Sorry about that. Let's do it. So down day today, the SPYs are down 0.8% here. We had a very flat open, if you remember. SPYs down 0.8%, Qs down 1.4, so they took the brunt of it. And the IWM closed flat green on the day. So really impressive relative strength from the IWM. It harkens back to Pat's note this morning, this chart from Morgan Stanley that he posted. Along with the note, if Mag 7 continues to underperform, it can provide additional fuel for other stocks to work. Conversely, if it regains its leadership, it could lead to a narrow market once again. So seemed that way today with the IWM holding in better and these Mag 7 names kind of weakening out off of the weakness from semiconductor stocks specifically. But if you look at the 5-minute charts here, the indexes, pretty weak day here. S&P was kind of a downside grind throughout the day. Q's pretty weak as well. Got wrecked when that ASML came out. And the IWM held in just fine. Grinded up, rolled down a little bit into the close, but not the end of the world. Pretty much closed very much where it started. The IWM we did the morning meeting this morning was relatively weak. It was down 0.25% when the S&P and the Nasdaq were opening up flat. So obviously throughout the day today, the IWM got relatively strong and the Qs sold off. ASML. What time did this start? 10:25. ASML really adding to that weakness. AMD and NVIDIA were already weak, particularly AMD, off of news that came out this morning that was related to further export restrictions. So AMD was already relatively weak, whereas like Apple was helping hold the Qs up. Apple was super strong in the beginning of the day today. NVIDIA actually tried to bounce back pretty well in the beginning of the day, but then weakened out. But then once that ASML hit, it just absolutely destroyed these stocks. So that is what then impacted the Qs in the way that it did. Just NVIDIA being such a big part of the NASDAQ. So let's take a look at our daily chart technicals after today's candle to see if anything changed. So is today a day to take notice of? Maybe when you look at the Qs. For the SPYs for the moment, this just looks like a healthy pullback of extension. The market this morning at yesterday's close and with our flat open this morning, we noted was moderately upside extended. Not so extreme that it can't continue higher, not so extreme that you could feel confident going in short, but extended enough that you didn't want to buy without a new setup or a new price correction coming in on the S&P. So we got the beginnings of that price correction today. We fully erased yesterday's move, so we kind of engulfed yesterday. But even at lows today, we didn't even pull all the way back into the ADMA on the daily chart. And we certainly didn't break any major levels. So 577 half-ish would be the first level that I would pay attention to on the downside to see if that creates some support. That coincides more or less with this ADMA on the daily. And then the really big level, if we ever get our way back down there, is that 565. We also got an update from the systematic flows from Goldman this morning that was in Pat's note. Let me see if I can find that real quick to note the level. Must be lower. So we have a new update on that first SPX CTA sell level. I think it was 56.62. So CTA flows here for the SPX over the course of this week are small selling no matter what happens over the course of the next 1 month. Meaningless amounts of buying in a flatter up tape. Some not massive but notable selling into a down tape. That first level to pay attention to on the downside, if we were able to get there, is 56.62. So that's been creeping up, but still pretty far away. And on the daily chart here for the SPYs, you've got the levels I just talked about on the downside that I would pay attention to, starting with 577.50, and then the 574.50, which is the level that we broke out from. And then finally, the biggest support is that 565.50, or if you really lose 565.50, you got a problem. But yeah, for the moment, market just looks, SPYs look fine. Is it a day to take notice of? Maybe a little bit of a pickup in volume, but it's hard to put too much on the bearishness of this SPY daily candle when we didn't even get down to the 80 MA on the daily. The Q daily candle is a little bit more concerning. That's where the relative weakness was. It's also just a pullback to the 80 MA on the daily, more or less, on a closing basis. We overshot it a little bit intraday, but the Qs hadn't been as strong to begin with. So the Qs actually lost the level that they broke out from, which was 495.50. Then the next kind of support zone I'd be looking at is 490, which we pretty much closed at. And then the really big one is also, similar to the SPYs, 477.50-ish, which we're pretty far away from. So whereas the SPYs look kind of okay to me, the Qs here, you could argue this is a little bit more of a bearish engulfing candle. So we'll see if that leads to any further downside price action. But the medium-term outlook, technical-wise, of the Qs, it looks just fine. Finally, a quick look at the Russell. So upside tail in the Russell doesn't look great. But keep in mind all this signals. All this signals is a price correction to the equilibrium zone. And the equilibrium zone is not very far away because the IWM was not as extended as the SPYs and Qs were, and still showed its relative strength today the way that it held in. So notable upside tail in the IWM, but I wouldn't get overly concerned about that leading to a ton of lower price action, at least not at the moment. So that's kind of the market update. As far as individual stocks go, there was a lot going on today. A lot of opportunity out there, more than I could take advantage of. One of my favorite earnings idea for the day today was this WBA through that 950 we discussed. It ended up opening, it was trading below or at 950 when we did the morning meeting. It opened up above that, so you kind of had to buy it right away. But if anybody was focused on it, anybody caught it, that WBA actually traded really, really well. Stock I very rarely trade, but if you're ever going to trade it, an earnings breakout off a base would be the way to do it. So it sounds like a few of you guys were involved in that one. So really good job for anybody that caught it. That was a good move. For me, I was focused on Wolf. I was focused on these Chinese names. I was trading Apple. I was trading NVIDIA pretty aggressively. So the semiconductors at a certain point in the depth of that kind of capitulation crash. So where do I even start? Apple, I shorted off the extension at a certain point today when it seemed like it was getting a little bit crazy. As just a day trade. And that worked out pretty well. Just looking for the move down to the 80 MA on the 5 minute, just down to that equilibrium zone. Good little scalp trade there. I think I was profitable on every day trade I took today, which does not always happen. So that's pretty good. I like when that happens. So Apple just the pullback trade off the extreme extension on the small time frame as we got to 10 a.m. for the move back to the 80 MA. You could have been a little greedier than I was and caught more of the downside there, especially when the market weakened out. But, you're shorting the strongest stock in the market. So that was one trade there. Oh, DJT, I forgot about this. Traded DJT like a maniac today. Ended up closing out my position into this down move at the end of the day. But the idea behind this DJT, and I didn't even notice it when we did the morning meeting. I actually noticed it in between when we finished the morning meeting and when the market started. I started shorting it just before the market opened as a smaller initial feeler position, and then kind of traded like a maniac throughout the day. Did really well with it. It's my best day trade of the day, my third best name on the day, and then obviously got smoked into the close. I'm not sure if that's just technical. Josh, I think, mentioned that there was a poll that was circulating that has Harris in the lead that maybe hit this down a little bit. But the technicals here, when I first was looking at this thing at whatever that price was, 32 plus, it was just so extended on the daily chart. I remember buying this back at like, I think on this day, on the 27th, I'm not 100% sure. Maybe it was this day on the 7th. When that one big insider was done selling and that got announced, and it helped the stock be really strong. I remember trading it that day. I just took it as a day trade, and I haven't been involved in it since. But it's given a 100% move since then, and that was only a handful of trading sessions ago. Obviously, the stock can trade really, really crazy and can be extended for long periods of time and can trade with momentum. But today was like a day, I don't know, at least a day 4, depending on how you want to characterize this inside day, at least a day 4 today, with the stock trading at $32, $33, $34, with the ADMA all the way down to 24. It's a lot of extension for a $25, $30 stock, and it was trading a ton of volume today. So this was really a big focus for me today, and ended up paying really well. It was one of those trades where I took a feeler in it and was kind of just batting it back and forth with like those 25-cent cash flow increments that I like to do, but leaving myself a lot of room to the upside to add and get bigger. So I did that into the up move up to $34 the whole way, and then also took on top of that like some additional discretionary trades within the confines of my overall trade, which I know Brandt had a great call out, basically called the top in DJT today. When I saw him do that, I hopped in that trade with him and had some extra stock for this pullback off these highs at like 10 a.m. So that was a really good call from Brandt if he's still there. So that was a focus. This Wolf was a focus, really off this trade here. I talked about it in the morning meeting. I felt it opened up too high. I didn't want to chase that price. But 1350 was an important zone pre-market. So if it could pull back to 14, I'd have an interest, and I love when that coincides with like the ADMA catch up for the first time for a pivot. So I actually even kind of forgot I left that bid out. I had a bid out at $14.01 that I put out pretty much as soon as the stock opened in case I could get a quick dip in this thing that could be buyable. That got filled, and I was like, oh, I forgot about that. Typed it up and saw that the ADMA was catching up and was above that 1350 at that point. So I was like, all right, I'll stick with this trade. I added down a little bit into this tail, caught the move, just traded a lot of it. I stopped myself at a half when it broke 14 this time on this bigger sell, and then I stuck with half and kind of continued to trade it a bit, and I decided to close that out into the close, even though I was up money in it, just because I didn't think it closed well enough. Though I really like that news that came out in this Wolf today. 31% short flow. They're going to get a big cash infusion from the CHIPS Act, and probably even more important than that is that Apollo came in and took a pretty big stake. So I like that. So that was another heavy focus today. Then we had these, semiconductor names getting absolutely destroyed. So that led to some trading opportunity. I remember kicking myself because I had been looking for shorts in NVIDIA for a while and never got it. Well, before I get to NVIDIA, when NVIDIA put in its low, and I know Josh was communicating, kind of his buying off the low. I didn't do that one specifically. I was buying sock sell off that low for the snapback to the ADMA. So it was just a quick trade up to that ADMA where I fully liquidated the position. Micron, I could have been a little greedier on that Micron, and it ended up actually holding up better when the other names rolled back down a little bit. But Micron was the other one that I took to the long side. But as I liquidated those longs in Micron and SOXL, and I'm actually pretty happy with myself for how I went through a thought process here, because sometimes a weakness I've had in trading, especially more like on the day trading side, is knowing when to flip. So, I might do a great job kind of capturing the bounce trade or whatever, and then I'll liquidate it at the right time. I'll liquidate it at that, pivot high. But a lot of times, or fairly rarely, I should say, do I then actually flip and come in on the other side. So, was able to do that today. I was long SOXL, long micron. We're looking for the bounce in those names. And then when this thing started to pivot into this equilibrium area, I built into a smallish short, but it ended up paying really well. And, I then kind of traded it, just kind of became a name that I was trading the whole rest of the day. Like you can see that first short there, and then I was just trading this thing very actively the rest of the day. And then that also became a pretty profitable trade by the end of it all. So I decided to keep a small swing in that. And then finally, it was the Chinese stocks. The Chinese stocks finally gapped down enough today to an area where I have an interest in them for the long side again. It does appear that there's some people that are trapped, so they sold down even further from that. Had that one really good day trade with Alibaba within the confines of the swing that I was building back into that I think Roble called out to the team, so that was a really good call out off that 103 area, off of the third candle down, puts in the hammer, some extension still on the 5-minute chart. So was not very greedy on that, just looking for the bounce back to the ADMA, so I was all out by that point. But that was a good trade, and then I kept some that's going to be a little bit more of a swing game plan that I honestly continue to build into very, very slowly on the way down. So at the end of the day today, I have a medium-sized swing long in Alibaba and a really small swing long in JD and a really small swing long in Baidu that I started. Baidu has gone all the way back down to fill its gap. I mean, Baidu's from 116 down to 94 at this point. At one point, I almost got into Futu. I had a bid in Futu today at 95.01 when it put in this low, which was 03, which is unfortunate. It would have been a nice fill. But it is what it is. You don't get them all sometimes. So I think that pretty much kind of describes my day. It's the update on the market, update on what I was trading today and what I'm swinging. I am happy to take a look at anything that you guys are looking at or any questions that anybody may have. Definitely fighting a little bit of a cold too, which sucks. We got United reporting here after hours. What's United doing? Up small. Yeah, nothing exciting there. Decent beat on EPS though. How's the guide? Guide's kind of in line. Wow, Interactive Brokers has 3.1 million accounts. It's a lot. STEC moving after hours, random Chinese name. Just be careful with this stuff. Up over 1,000%. Wow. I'm not touching that. All right. Possible question or comment from Tate. QQQ low was 488.68. 13 EMA on the daily is 488.65. I know you've been looking at that 13 EMA a lot, so it's an impressive hold by 3 cents. It's the midpoint between the 8 and 21. So yeah, I like that. I always am kind of eyeballing roughly where I expect the midpoint is. So if you've got the 13 EMA on there, then it's just going to tell you, pretty much exactly what it is. So I look at the midpoint, but just without the line on there. So it's an interesting spot to see when you're getting right into the heart of what I consider to be the equilibrium zone technically on the time frame that we're looking at. So far, that QQQ is putting in a double top off of 500 with NVIDIA failing 140 and Meta failing 600. I didn't really look at Meta very much today. Oh yeah, I talked about this Meta, and Meta was very weak off the open, right? Yeah, I talked about this Meta in the morning meeting today that I don't like it as a long, after that like little lower high tail off of yesterday's candle came in. We have VIX expiration. Yeah, I do still have some UVIXY long. I added to it today, so that worked out okay. Back to the 28 spot. That's been important to me. The calls I have are for $28. They expire this week, but I've already sold more than half of them. So even if they expire worthless, I'll make money on that. Yeah, so mainly just commentary there from Tate. I appreciate that. Trying to have a restful evening, but not trading STEC. Drug was another crazy one. Are they running that after hours? Oh, they brought it up to 46 and now it's back down. DRUG. Sorry, got it on my other screen. Wow, yeah, they did rip that up to 46 as soon as the market closed. I don't know what the float is on this drug, but these are the names that I just got to avoid. That's crazy. Like that HKD got spoken about a lot at the Traders for a Cause. Oh, sorry. Speaking of Traders for a Cause, I had mentioned that guy Lance Brightstein yesterday, who I found to be very, very impressive. And so I did a panel with him on Sunday. I spoke by myself on Saturday. I did a panel with him on Sunday that also had, I mentioned it yesterday, David Prince, and a trader from SMB, and a trader from 7 Points. And, it went really well. I didn't know what the questions were going to be ahead of time or anything like that. And then when time was running out, like, he kind of brought up, like, a lightning round when time was almost up to talk about, like, a charity or a cause or something like that that interests each one of us personally. So, long story short, I'm not going to get into all of what I said, but long story short, I had mentioned St. Jude's Children's Hospital. And then he emailed me today. Where's my email? He emailed me today that he was touched by the story that I kind of gave when I spoke on the panel when I was asked about that, and that he was going to donate $25,000 to St. Jude's Children's Hospital just because of the story that I said. So I thought that that was actually really touching and awesome that he did that. And he asked that I share this link to everyone here on the team for this Project Impact that Traders for a Cause is involved with. I'll put it into the chat in the YouTube also, in case anybody is interested in donating or signing up and participating in that. You can have it there also. So yeah, it was really cool that he did that. Really, really good guy and really, really good trader. So anyway, oh yeah, we were talking about the reason why I even thought about that was because a lot of people brought up that HKD squeeze, talking about Chinese names that can go nuts after hours. So he brought up that HKD, or several people brought up that HKD squeeze over the course of the 4-day weekend conference there. So just be careful is the point that I'm saying when you're trading these drug name, like the name drug that's moving right now, or this STEC. Sometimes we can do really, really well on the short side of those names when we time it correctly, but please make sure you manage your risk, and please make sure that you are understanding the liquidity of the stock that you're trading after hours that's going crazy. If it's got a $75, $50, $5 spread, you need to be aware of that, or what Josh just said. All it takes is getting stuck short the wrong one that doesn't have the liquidity, that squeezes the way that HKD did, or doesn't even have to be that bad, and it can be career-ending. Even this one guy, Bryce, I should really remember his last name, but my brain's not working, who was also on that panel with me. He's just like specifically a short seller on a lot of biotech names that kind of go crazy. And he actually, his entire conference was just reviewing losses, which I actually thought was awesome. He He went through like 15 trades that were memorable from his career, and 14 out of the 15 of them were losers. And he, they were always to the short side, but kind of went over his approach to when he's trading them correctly, how he makes money, and it's always shorting them on the way down after the trend is broken, not shorting them on the way up, and then when he's shorting them on the way down, making sure that he has a very clear stop loss based on a previous pivot high. So, not my specialty by any means is shorting those crazy stocks that are up 1,000% plus. It's really not a focus for me in my trading, but there's a lot of ways to make money in this business, and a lot of people do it in a lot of different ways. And that's actually one of the cool things about going to an event like Traders for a Cause is that you just get exposed to a lot of different successful people with a lot of different approaches. So anyway, next year from Mike L. Question. Yesterday you mentioned 5,000 share short order on NVIDIA. How do you execute that size? I just put an offer out. Sometimes I place an order at a key level for 100 shares and I only get filled 1 or 2 shares. Sure, that can happen. If you're placing a limit order, there's no guarantee on a fill. It happens to me sometimes also. I think I even remarked one time when I was on the radio this morning that whatever stock I was trading, I was like, I got filled 3 shares. What's that going to do for me? Sometimes it's more annoying to get partialed because the amount of time it spends to like adjust a tier size to a partial amount to round out your lot is like costs you more money than it'll ever be worth. But it is what it is. If you have a limit order out and you're offered at the high or the low and they don't fully fill you, it just is what it is. I mean, NVIDIA though traded 374 million shares today. So if I have a 5,000 share offer out in NVIDIA, will there be HFT robots that chisel that 5,000 share order? Yeah, probably. But, I'm either getting filled on it or not. That stock is so thick. NVIDIA is not a name. Some stocks I trade, I'll hide my size on my bids and offers if I think it's a thinner name and that it'll make it more difficult for me to get filled by showing too much size. NVIDIA is not one of those stocks. I am not big enough of a trader. I'm not putting, even if you put 50,000 shares out in one order, you're not, it's going to be very minor in the way that showing of that size causes you to not get filled. It have to be hundreds of thousands of shares. So yeah, Mike, you're just so good, I think, that you so perfectly pick the high and low where to put your bid and offer that you're only getting filled a couple shares. All right. No, I don't think so, Kevin. I don't think that was his name. I have to look it up. Over in the YouTube, from Cyril. ARM was looking good at the beginning of the day, then it failed. Yeah, I mean, hard to be long any semiconductor name today, unless it was Wolf, and even that was difficult. I don't love the idea of trying to buy this ARM, though, after 5 up days in a row. Yeah, I don't love the idea of buying this gap down in this ARM. And because it gapped down, it means it was relatively weak to the Qs also when you're on like this day 5 up. Now, could you have predicted at the open that it was going to break yesterday's low, which was like a pretty wide-ranging upside candle? No. But even that just gets you down to the ADMA on the daily chart, just gets you down into that equilibrium area. So this is another one that you could have been long off that kind of capitulation low when we were buying some of those stocks down there. Google relative strength ? Yeah, Google with a little bit of relative strength today, it appears. And still above that 165. 165 is the spot that I was watching. And then it looks like it's starting to establish this 167.50 as an important resistance level. So you can pay attention to that. Cyril's saying Hong Kong and Japan indexes are decently down as well. Could it be dragging the U.S. market down too? I know that China was down overseas, but I thought that Japan was up last night. I don't know if there's any futures market that's open for them right now. Um, I kind of think that it's going to be more the opposite. Well, it'll make sense if those are down tonight, or even if their futures are down now, um, because what led us lower today was semiconductors. So since what led us lower today was semiconductors, I would assume that that means that you'll see weakness in Taiwan, Hong Kong, Japan tonight. So we'll see. We'll assess it in the morning. Corey asking me for my thoughts on IWM. Um, so a little bit of an upside tail there for the Russell, but with good relative strength. So the tail means that we'll see where it gaps to tomorrow, but it means I probably don't want to really be heavily buying the Russell tomorrow. But I'm not looking for a lot of downside either where I would short it. Would probably be thinking a move, down to 220-ish could be viable. 222 is a little bit important also. I know Tate was mentioning that level today, and it held at one point intraday pretty much perfectly. But the ADMA is down at 220, spot 35. Today's upside tail indicates to me that you need a price or time correction to that equilibrium area. So we'll see, but there's still really good relative strength on the Russell. From you, Vixie Bullet. If today is a day one to the downside, then us selling off into the election, starting from a pop and drop, is a funny way to do it. Okay, some great commentary here from you, Vixie Bull, in the YouTube. That's worth mentioning, I think, a little bit. So, the market just broke out a couple days ago. 574.50 was the SPY spot that I was watching. I think everyone knows, there's been enough time talking about it, that I've been having like a bearish thesis on this market throughout the entire month of October, just because of the election cycle. And like I've said, every single time over the course of my career, I've seen a sell-off into a presidential election, and then they buy you back after. It's also a weaker period from a seasonality perspective, because you don't have the buybacks that are there in the market because of the earnings blackout window that's ongoing. So the flip side, though, and I've spent a lot of time like mentioning this, is it's how interesting it's been that we've had a VIX that was sitting up, and I don't know where the VIX closed. If anybody can give me a quote on it, I'd like to see that. We've had a VIX that's been sitting at $21 with $20.65. Thank you, Dennis. We've had a VIX that's been sitting at $21 with a market that's was going sideways, and then only recently further broke up still to all-time highs. Yet the VIX is at $20.65. How and why? Well, the market's a really interesting thing where sometimes when everybody knows or thinks the same thing, you can't get that move, and you get that move potentially even in the other direction. So I think that there's a lot of smart market participants that are out there who, in like the fund space, who've kind of had a similar thought process maybe to me, where it's like, oh, I don't want to be putting on a lot of long risk right now in front of the election, and I want to have a lot of hedges on. And especially after the blowout that we had at the beginning of August, and to some degree the beginning of September, the risk managers of some of these firms are probably wanting to be a little bit tighter on risk, especially when you go into an election. So why has the VIX been as elevated as it has been when the market has been so strong, is because people have been buying a lot of that downside protection. I don't think we've seen it as much recently, but I remember earlier in October, like Bill was posting like all the VIX calls and everything that have been getting bought up. So if everyone's got the same thought process of, wow, I'm too nervous to be doing a lot of long buying here in October, and everyone is, buying protection, you can have an elevated VIX with the market actually kind of doing nothing. And that's what we saw. And if we couldn't actually, like I've also discussed, like I keep saying my thought process is bearish, but unless the technicals can confirm it, I can't actually really be bearish. And they've never confirmed it at all this month. We looked like we wanted to break support a couple times. We never did. So we've never triggered any of the downside levels that can lead to a feedback cycle of selling in the market. And then what happens is as time goes by, and especially as time goes by and this market moves higher, then all of a sudden those people that were underinvested or overly hedged are in trouble, and that actually causes the market to move up more easily. So then you see the market break out through that 574.50 just a couple days ago, and everyone's underexposed to this move. So, that can actually create, I don't want to call this 2 day up move a crash up. I think that would be an exaggeration, but it can create that really strong move, and could have even continued today without the semiconductor catalyst that we actually had happen. So, I'm still trying to maintain some degree of my bearish thesis. I still have a TQQQ short on. I've done a pretty good job trading it. I've never been out of the money on that position this entire month, even at highs yesterday. Gave back some P&L, sure, but I've never been out of the money on TQQQ. And then, if anything, I've actually just been continuing to add to it on the way up, to the point where by yesterday's close, I had a lot of size in TQQQ. So today, when we had this pullback, TQQQ is my best name of all my symbols that I'm in by 3.5 fold. And my second best one is UVixie long. So I was certainly thinking at a certain point today when we saw this market kind of crack back down a little bit, like how interesting would it be that everyone here in the beginning of October is, trying to have these hedges on. They're trying to limit their long exposure. Market refuses to break down. And I also think that there's something to what Tepper was saying about how, to some degree, the market is pricing in that what's going to happen off the election here is going to be gridlock. And gridlock is oftentimes the best case situation for the market. So there's just a lot of reasons that I think that the market has held up in the face of everything that's going on right now, and then to some degree was able to break higher. But now once you start to get that break higher these last couple of days, those people that are underinvested or off sides need to very quickly go, uh-oh, I'm now massively underperforming. I saw a note somewhere, I don't know if it was in Pat's note or if it was in a different piece of research that I read, that showed kind of the underpositioning basically of some of these funds and the chasing effect that has to happen on this upside so that they're not, getting smoked in terms of underperformance of the S&P. Because keep in mind, unlike us, we trade for a living, we trade for cash flow. If you're a hedge fund, you trade versus a benchmark. What matters to you more than anything, and I don't think it was in Pat's note today, so somewhere else I read it. What matters to you more than anything if you're a fund manager different than us, for me, what I care about is what's my P&L, how much am I up, how much am I down. I really don't care. I never compare myself to the S&P or to any benchmark. But if you are managing a fund, you need to be managing yourself to that benchmark, because that's what's going to determine whether or not you maintain your assets and raise more. So that's the most important thing. So I was thinking today, when we started to sell off after this 2 big up days, well, those 2 big up days that we had maybe then forced some of these managers who are underperforming the S&P right now because the market's breaking higher and they're hedged out to, have to unwind those hedges and start chasing some upside. So going back to what you just said there, you Vixie Bull in the YouTube, I think it's a really smart statement that if, and it's certainly still an if there is still any chance that we can see a sell-off in October in front of the election, it would be pretty interesting to see it happen after we break higher to position everybody off sides and then break down. And it might almost actually make it easier to go lower if we break higher first. Now, I don't want to call for that. I don't want that to be like a on-the-record market call for me. It's something that's in the back of my head. Because like I always say, the technicals are number one. And when I look at the technicals of the SPY right now, the SPY technicals are just fine and healthy. This is not even a full pullback to the ADMA. But it is interesting that it's led lower by semiconductors. And if there can be any follow-through to that off of an economic number, off of continued weakness after ASML today on some of these earnings reports, it might almost make it even easier for the market to be able to break down because it had that pop first. kind of give everybody max pain on both sides, the old shake and bake to the upside to break to the downside. So just know your downside levels. For the moment, the market's fine and healthy, but know those levels that we talked about. 577.50, 574.50, 565.50 are the major levels, plus the SPX trigger level that we mentioned, which is 56.60. I forget. Pulled it up earlier, and it clears out some of that position. That's right, Bill. So we'll see what happens. For the moment, these technicals are holding in, but if you can actually break lower, you could lead to a bigger push. All right, I think we covered it for today. So I'll wrap it up there. Have a great night, and I will see you all tomorrow.